Okay, we are here with lesson 2, and hopefully you can see everything. We're gonna go back to lesson 1 real quick at the very end, and we're gonna cover, once again, playing with positives. So hopefully you remember from lesson 1, what times what equals a positive. A negative times a negative equals a positive, okay? So we want to make y into a negative. This is something you probably won't have to ever do, but for the sake of teaching positives and negatives and how to work with them, we're going to do it. Okay, so as we did in lesson 1, what do you see in the number positive 9? So remember last time we said, we see 9, but it's not just 9, we now see positive 9, positive 9. We can play with positives, right? So we know in this 9 is gonna be 2 negatives, okay? Somewhere in this 9 is 2 negatives. Now, we're gonna say that in that 9 is gonna be a -1 and a -9. You can even break that down further if you want. It's all about how your brain works and how you think about things, into a -1 times a -1 times a positive 9. It just depends on how you felt about the last lesson. Either one works, okay? For right now, for my purposes, we're gonna go with -1 and -9, okay? Now, we need to bring your -1, right? Because we're not looking for -9y, we're looking for -y. Now, -y, just like last time, we said y is never just y, it's 1y, and it's 1 over 1y. So we're trying to make that 1 over 1, that's understood before the y, into a negative. So we're going to divide both sides by a -1, okay? Now, once again, you can decide whether you learned it as dividing by a whole number versus multiplying by the reciprocal. I'm dividing by a whole number. Go back to part 1, relearn dividing by a reciprocal, same difference, but we're just doing it with ones, so it doesn't matter that much. But -1 divided by -1 cancel each other out, because -1 divided by -1 is 1. And we're going to divide y by -1. Y divided by -1 is -y, okay? Or -1y. So this is now -y equals, what's left over here? -9. Now, a lot of you automatically know, well, duh, if y equals 9, -y is going to be -9. But when you keep getting into bigger and bigger equations and things, that's not always going to be the most obvious thing. So going back to the super duper basics is important. Now let's go down here. We need to make a positive, right? So we know right before this a is an understood 1, and not just any 1. It's a -1. Here, we know that this is a -2, okay? So back to our rules from yesterday, a negative times a negative is a positive, okay? So we are going to divide by -1, again, divide by a whole number versus multiply by the reciprocal. That -1 and -1 cancel each other out. you're left with a positive a over here. You're going to divide the other side by -1. -2 divided by -1 is a positive. So a negative divided by a negative is also a positive. So that negative here is going to cancel each other out. You just have +2 over 1. Okay? So you're going to have the answer positive a equals +2 x squared. That's how you're going to make that positive. And again, a lot of you know this. It's very obvious, but some of you don't. And it's actually kind of surprising how many people don't know this. All right, let's talk about the language of math. The number of people that I see who do math in a horizontal fashion across their paper is shocking. You don't do math that way. That's a good way to lose your positives and negatives and get your things confused and lose terms and stuff just goes all over the place. So it is linear in a downward line. Linear means in a line, okay? You need to use lined paper unless you are really good at math, okay? You need to use lined paper. And even to this day, I still feel strongly about my calculus students using lined paper. Now, you're gonna get homework assignments, you're gonna get tests, you're gonna get all sorts of stuff on plain white paper, right? That plain white paper is not good enough. You need to rewrite your problems on lined paper. So, let's cover the problem given y, given x equals 2, solve y equals x over 4 plus 1, okay? So when we're saying it's linear in a downward line, we want you to keep your equal signs, equal symbols in a line, right? So your y is gonna, and I want you to skip a line, but I don't have enough space to skip a line. You're gonna skip a line and you're gonna go y equals, again, x is a term. It is a configuration of lines. It is equivalent to something. It is equivalent to the term, or to the value 2. 2 can be directly substituted in for x. So we're gonna substitute that 2 in for x. 2 over 4 plus 1, okay? Y equals 1/2 plus 1. You know that 1 is not just 1, it's 1 over 1. Okay, and so on and so forth. And you would go down in a downward fashion in a line on lined paper with your equal symbols in a line, equal, 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 and you would skip a line. Another thing, your division bars, I don't want your division bars here in the middle of nowhere. Like, don't do that, because then you're gonna be writing all over the place, right? You're gonna be writing over each other, because I know a lot of you have chicken scratch handwriting, and nobody's gonna be able to understand what you're doing. Also, one more thing, at the end, when you do find whatever your number is, circle it, because your teacher needs to find it. Your teacher needs to know what your answer is. Double underline it. Put it in a box. Do something so your teacher knows where it is. All right, moving on. Subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive. This is the inverse property of addition. Forgot my little quotes. So, how I learned this and how I always teach it is you're going to connect, this is 9 minus the quantity of -2, okay? You're going to connect your two negative signs, or your subtraction and your negative sign, and you're going to color this in. And all of a sudden that y equals 9 plus 2, which equals 11. Okay? That's all it is. Same thing here. B equals -5 minus -10. You're going to connect these two lines here, your subtraction bar and your negative. You're going to fill this parentheses in. All of a sudden it's a plus sign. B equals -5 plus 10, which equals +5. That's all it is. Any number minus a negative number just means that you're adding that number. All right, last thing. We got to cover this really quick. Can you go around? Sorry, I'm recording. All right, last thing real quick, because we have a class coming into this room. Dependent and independent variables. That's a lot of math jargon. People hear stuff like this and then they like shut their brains down. And they're like, I don't want to pay attention. Those are big words. Oh my God, right? Okay, so let's give you a basic example, right? So if you're talking about a plant that you have on your counter in your house, right? A little vine plant or whatever, it's an indoor tropical plant, and you're wondering, well, if I increase the temperature in my house, how is it going to affect the growth of that plant? Or if I decrease the temperature around that plant, how will it affect that plant? So the thing that you're changing is going to be your independent variable, okay? So what are you changing, the temp or the growth? You're actively changing the temperature. So your temperature is going to be your independent variable. Okay, your growth depends or relies on the change in temperature. All right, using this, you have y equals 2x plus 1. Y is your output. So up here, when you were doing this, how does temperature affect the growth of a plant? Your output is growth. It's what's coming out of the act of changing the temperature. So let me write this too. Output. Okay? And then temperature is input. Y is going to be your output because you're going to put something in for X and you're going to solve this side of the equation to get an output of Y. So your Y is going to be your output, okay? Your X is going to be your input. Output is your dependent variable. Your input is your independent variable. So if we put in the value of 1 for x, we're gonna have, and change colors, hopefully you can see this, y equals 2 times 1 plus 1. This is obviously gonna be 2 plus 1, which equals 3. Oops. All right, now if we change x, if we change our independent variable, and we all of a sudden go y equals 2 times 2, so we just changed our x to 2, plus 1, that's going to be 4 plus 1 equals 5. So you can see the output, y, output dependent variable, output y changed depending on your input. All right, now there's another class in here.